We're joined now by Congressman Pat Fallon, a Republican from Texas. Congressman, always good to see you. So look, let's be very clear. Pretty much all those things are things that are good for America. But as my grandfather told me a long time ago, it's often more important how you do things than what you're actually trying to do. And the way Democrats are trying to allocate these resources seems to leave less money for what we desperately need and more money for things that may be dubious in their origins.
Yeah, no, Joe, and thanks for having me on. You're absolutely right. It's not so much what we need as what they want. And as you just mentioned, the $1.2 trillion infrastructure package, hovering around 10% of it is actually going towards what we would consider real and hard infrastructure: roads, bridges, waterways, broadband internet, that sort of thing. And it's also the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, scored this, and they said that there's $625 billion in new spending, and yet they only have $180 billion in offsets. So there's a $400 billion plus hole here, and they just seem to ignore that.
Absolutely. Now, we talk about the fact we had 13 Republican lawmakers cross party lines, join the Democrats in voting in favor for that legislation. We actually had 6 Democrats who voted against it from that progressive caucus. So it seems like it's possible Pelosi didn't even have the votes to pass the bill along party lines. If Republicans did have that leverage, why didn't they use it?
That is just, I can't tell you, Joe, I'd be beyond honest and be very candid and frank with you here, how disappointed I am and so many other of my colleagues, and I think millions of our constituents, tens of millions of them, that 13 Republicans would do essentially Nancy Pelosi's bidding and Joe Biden's work for them. This was a bad infrastructure package. As you mentioned, we do need an infrastructure package. We do have aging roads and bridges and waterways and airports, and the broadband internet is something we need to do for rural communities. But at the same time, you don't need $1.2 trillion. Remember, this whole thing started with Biden saying that we needed $2.25 trillion for infrastructure. Right. He had to have it, or the sky was going to fall. And then magically, negotiating against himself, he got it down to 1.2. So I think a realistic package would be something more on the line of $200 or $300 billion that could actually go to the things we desperately need as a country.
Absolutely. You talk about the actual scoring of the bill. There's some estimates that the true price tag will be north of $4 trillion, not the 1.2 that is currently on paper. When you look at that, to me, the problem is that the runover, so to speak, the cup that spilleth over, are on things that are not central and critical to core American competencies: those roads, those bridges, those waterways, that broadband. How do we get the American people to understand that? And particularly as we head into this winter and then into the summer after that, as the heating costs continue to rise, as we sit here and look at food prices skyrocketing and people on fixed incomes getting the short squeeze at a time when they can least afford it, how do we get the American people to line up the dots in many ways like they just did down in Virginia?
Yeah, I was going to say they just seem to do that in Virginia. And there's black holes. A lot of this money, like in transit, in the COVID relief package, transit got $70 billion. And in this bill, they're getting an additional $91 billion. You would expect some folks to operate, maybe not at a profit, but at least at a break even. And if you continually give them these kinds of bailouts, they're going to be run in a very inefficient manner rather. And that's what the American people are talking. And really, to your question, it's incumbent upon us, members of Congress, both in the House and the Senate, to tell the American people the truth. But don't make it esoteric. Make it very digestible so they can go home and grasp it and get their arms around it so we can change the direction of this country come next November.
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at what's happening here specifically, with all of this money being spent, it just seems out of control. I'd be remiss if I didn't touch base with you on what just happened the latest with this Durham report. Again, seems like that slow-moving arc towards justice. So many people seemingly forgotten about the fact that that Steele dossier seemed to have dubious origins, and the people who reported on it breathlessly don't want to be bothered to update their viewers. Hey, by the way, it looks like not only did we get it wrong, but the people who actually came up with these documents may in fact have engaged in criminal activity.
Yeah, I mean, the Russian hoax went on for the entire Trump presidency for 4 years. And that's the way the liberal media plays this stuff, right? They have an accusation from, even if it's a dubious source, they put it on page 1. And then when they find out the truth comes out and it was untrue, they put it back on page 28, like in a corrections, or they just, it's like CNN does so often, just ignore it wholly. And I'm glad that, justice hopefully here will be served and criminal activity, will be punished. And some of those folks need to go, in a cage because they are absolutely criminal for far too long.
Absolutely. Congressman Pat Fallon, as always, good to see you, my friend. God bless. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Joe. God bless. Take care.